Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk, with a story that morphed and changed 10 billion times before even the week was over. It's wild to me that his day in court is finally happening. And guess who has opinions on that? Just take a random guess who has opinions on that. You'll never guess. If you answered like literally every conservative content creator ever, you'd be right, but specifically today we're talking about Tim Pool. So let's get into that.
The major breaking news, Charlie Kirk's accused killer, Tyler Robinson, smiles in first court appearance. They say Tyler Robinson, who previously appeared...
How dare he smile? How dare he do a basic human emotion? This is the exact reason why Kyle Rittenhouse was coached to cry in court. The exact reason why he was coached to have those emotions there. It was specifically so that this wouldn't happen. Anyway.
Only by audio and video feed from jail, entered the courtroom wearing a dress shirt, tie, and slacks with restraints on his wrists and ankles. The AP reported that he smiled towards family members seated in the front row. His mother wiped away tears as his father and brother sat beside her. Closed circuit video from the courtroom also shows Robinson smiling and laughing while commenting to one of his attorneys. A state judge is weighing the public's right to transparency against concerns from Robinson's defense team that intense media scrutiny could jeopardize his ability to receive a fair trial. I think that's a silly prospect. I also think that...
You think it's a silly prospect, but that's actually one of the reasons it was so hard. Wasn't it one of the reasons it was so hard to get Al Capone specifically? Like, you couldn't get a fucking fair trial. Media exposure actively made it difficult to find a jury that would be fair. Like, you can say that's a silly prospect, but that's been a pretty common thing in our legal system for fuck ever. Hey, what are y'all's thoughts? What are y'all's thoughts on what's going on with this entire case trial? Do you think that the jury's going to be nullified over and over again? Do you think that this is going to go the Al Capone route, where, you know, something else might get him out? How do you see this going? I am not an expert here, but I do want my audience to give me some info on that.
There's something particularly telling in all of this. Why hasn't his parents come out and claimed he was innocent? Has that happened?
Yeah, no, they have not. They haven't said anything, and they have been speaking with him virtually. And they have, they haven't said anything publicly. I think they might be under a gag order, but even so, if it were my son and he was innocent and I was under a gag order, I would go to prison screaming for his innocence.
Didn't his father turn him in?
Well, yeah. I mean,
was it the father? Or was it the boyfriend? Or was it the girlfriend? Or was it the roommate? Or was it the landlord? Or was it the story fucking kept changing?
Exactly right. So the day after Charlie was killed, the FBI released the surveillance video. There was some internal discussion in Utah as to whether that video should be released. And in fact, his mother and father were able to recognize him from the video. And the sheriff in,
Wait, I thought he turned himself in. Wasn't that also one of the stories that propagated? Because, like, again... the story for what happened with Tyler Robinson changed so much and so quickly when it happened. I don't know if I can believe a word out of your mouth, because that story kept fucking changing. I was covering it as it was happening.
George County, is that what it is? Where Robinson is from, gave a whole press conference about exactly what went down. And so the parents had recognized him. They called him. They tried to get in touch with him. They said, why don't you come home and we'll talk about it. He didn't live with them, but, come back to the childhood home. They talked about it. They ended up contacting a friend of theirs who was in law enforcement. This is all from the sheriff's press conference. They ended up...
Okay, so there was a version of the events to try to get the whole story straight. Is this the one that includes the texts that definitely weren't fabricated?
Contacting a family friend who was in law enforcement who helped them facilitate turning him in and the conditions by which he would go turn himself in. And among those conditions were that his parents could stay with him the whole time until the police and the jurisdiction were able to come get him. So he sat with his parents for 3 hours in that sheriff's office, and the sheriff didn't question him, didn't do anything. They were just waiting for the jurisdiction police to come down and pick him up, which they did. But yeah, the sheriff was very clear exactly what went on. And in fact, in that press conference, part of why he was giving that press conference was to explain that one of his former deputies or something who had the same name as the law enforcement friend of the family, was not the guy. He was like, stop harassing this guy. This was not the guy. And yeah, that's what happened. And since then, his parents have been...
Allegedly. That's allegedly what happened. Because again, we got so many different versions of that story as it was happening. What we have now apparently is the version of the events that has been curated by law enforcement, which does not always line up with reality either.
Silent. They've been communicating with him virtually. And today it was reported that they were actually, his parents plus another relative were in the courtroom. And when and at a certain point, the judge said, we're going to close to press right now, and we'll bring press back in a little, but we're going to close right now so that we can talk about some different security matters for this case. And I think it was the prosecutors stood up and said, his family is here. Can they stay for this? And the judge said, no, they can't stay. And so there were reports on Twitter from Brian Enton, who's a reporter, and he was saying, he was in the courtroom, and he said, now his mother's out here in the hall crying, and she's just out here with the rest of us. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy.
Candace had stated that she thought Robinson was innocent, or something to that effect. And I think, it's been a while since you talked about it, but that his parents didn't actually turn him in, or something to that effect.
Again, the story kept changing. Tim's actually right here.
Is questioned the official narrative. And there are a lot of people that believe the parents actually didn't turn him in and none of this is true. But the parents were sitting right there. They've not come out and said our child is innocent or anything like that.
No.
They have every opportunity to do that. And that's something typical that happens in defense when someone's family member is being prosecuted, but they're not.
Right.
Have we learned anything about what their defense is intending to say?
No,
unless, of course, they're under gag order. Like, you literally mentioned earlier that you would, like, if you were the mother, you would violate the gag order, but like you mentioned specifically the idea of a gag order. So if a gag order is happening, then they're not saying shit because of a gag order. But again, we don't know all the details that are going on there. And as has been proven in the past, in this exact case, the actual details that come out, even from official sources, sometimes just are fucking wrong. It's a wild thing. It's a thing we're going to have to wait and see how the actual case ends up going because of that.
Have not. They have been pretty closed about it. They're really intent on keeping cameras out of the courtroom, and they're really intent on
But is he actually pleading not guilty?
He hasn't entered a plea yet. Yeah.
This is weird.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, if it were...
Is it weird? It's a very high profile case. Whether or not he's the guy that did it, it's a very, very high profile murder. And say what you want about Charlie Kirk and what he did and all that other fun stuff. And I agree, dude was a fucking monster. It's a high-profile case. It is a very high-profile case. Very high-profile cases tend to buck the norm. So it makes sense that this is weird. Like, yes, it's weird, but it is an expected weird.
My kid and I believed in his innocence. Like, you guys are parents. You'd go to the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's got to be devastating for the, I have feelings of grace for everybody involved in this, and I feel badly for his parents.
Look, for anyone that's not conspiracy minded, the evidence that is publicly available makes you say, yeah, it was probably that kid. Obviously, you have to wait for the court case, and obviously things can come out in the trial and stuff. But unless you're the kind of person that is already incredibly skeptical of the government and incredibly skeptical of the official narrative, and you don't have ulterior motives, this is kind of like, yeah, I mean, it looks like the kid did it. The parents turned him in, got these emails or these text messages.
There were also Discord messages.
Said for anybody who's not conspiracy minded, look, it's not conspiracy-minded when the narrative kept shifting at a rapid pace. It's not conspiracy-minded at that point. I will say this, though. I will say this, just for the record. I'm perfectly willing to believe that he did it. I'm perfectly willing to believe that Tyler Robinson did it. A lot of the evidence, as mishandled and weird as it was, there is a version of the story that has been told that does point to him being the shooter. I'm willing to believe that. I want to see what evidence bears out. Now that the story is not changing every, hour on the hour, I want to see what happens. But I'm not going to hang my hat one way or another. I don't personally care if he did it or not. Because whether or not he did it doesn't really change anything. I say that because despite my disagreements with Grums, because Grums actually said something to this degree about a week after the murder. Despite my disagreements with Grums, I actually kind of have to agree with him now on that, because regardless of whether Tyler Robinson did it, the media apparatus for conservatives has already milked this for damn near all it's worth. And the end result of that is now I have to see Erica Kirk twerking on my Facebook feed. And I didn't consent to that, but I found it anyway. And that's not something that I was super into seeing. Not really. I'm very demi. I'm not into people who live with that much hate. I can't. The end result is that the conservative media apparatus has already done everything with the Kirk story that they're going to. Charlie Kirk is now noted as like the number 4 YouTuber of 2006, despite literally all of the, or 2025, despite literally all of the hate that he spewed on the platform. None of that gets talked about, because now the right have turned him into a pseudo Martin Luther King. They've tried to do that, and within the right-wing sphere, that's basically what's happened. When I go out and drive in my car, there is a non-zero chance, much higher than it used to be, that I'm going to see Charlie Kirk memorabilia on somebody's car, on some bumper sticker. Usually it's some type of like, "We are Charlie Kirk" thing, but I see it. I have to see people venerating a dude constantly. I see people at my card shop I go to, and even people who own businesses that I like to frequent, talking positively about a dude who did nothing but spew hate under the guise of debate and reasoned skepticism. The right's already won in this regard. They've already won the battle over what the legacy of Charlie Kirk is going to be, irrespective of whether Tyler Robinson gets the execution, irrespective of whether he gets prison time, irrespective of whether he even gets convicted as the person who did it. The right already got their narrative, and minds are already made up on that side of the aisle. It no longer matters what happens here in the case, outside of how much it matters to Tyler Robinson and his family and his loved ones. Orla Seraph says, but first, remember when they were banning people for quoting him accurately? Yeah. And now we've got people who through one side of their mouth freak out about Charlie Kirk and the way that people have like literally accurately quoted him, saying that they're being hateful towards the dead and all that stupid shit. And then out of the other side of their mouths, praising fucking Donald Trump for doing the same thing. By the way, it was weird. The conservative apparatus flipped from "you won't find conservatives, you won't find Republicans saying anything bad about Rob Reiner," and then literally within a day after Donald Trump showed them what the narrative should be, suddenly you have people who are actually saying the opposite of what they were saying before. Actually, I've got some of this real quick here, because this is what happened. I know this is for a different video, but this is kind of the narrative that you're seeing a lot in conservative spaces right now. It's this idea that leftists are all out to kill them. They tried to kill Trump. They killed Charlie Kirk. Now they've killed Ella Cook. We don't have information on the motives for Tyler Robinson. We know that the person who tried to kill Trump was a far-right hack. And we are still looking for information on the Ella Cook situation, which I'll talk about here in a later video. But this is the narrative that I'm seeing a bunch. Even from people who are like running for fucking Congress, I'm seeing this shit. And it's wild to me.
Messages that he sent to his like gaming friends.
Yeah. There was talk about it prior to it.
There were always there were the text messages to the Lance Twiggs guy.
To think that it wasn't him, or to
wait, there was talk about it prior? Wait, talk about it prior? I don't remember that from the Discord messages. Flimsy as the transcripts were, I remember it being after the fact stuff.
To be so strongly, to believe so strongly that it wasn't him to say, we have to find the real killer, and we need to ask all these questions. You have to be incredibly conspiracy minded, and you have to be generally too online, to your point.
There's also kind of this thing of like, Charlie was so big, right? He was such a big thought leader in this movement. He touched everybody's lives. He held so many people together who, you know, adored him and maybe didn't like each other. And so to think that like some twerpy...
He's kind of, okay, so technically, yeah, in the sense that Charlie Kirk ran Turning Point USA and a bunch of disparate conservative minds existed under there. But I'd argue that Ben Shapiro does more of that with the Daily Wire, or at least did more of that. PragerU probably also does more of that with their organization. But I guess you could also argue that Turning Point USA does the same thing.
You know, lots of things I won't say on air could take someone like that down. It is kind of hard to believe that is it hard to believe that guns exist? I don't think it's hard to believe that guns exist, ma'am. All due respect. I believe that the idea of guns being the great equalizer is enough to understand that it's not weird to think that one like deranged or angry or hurt kid killed a person who was on a public stage with minimal security. I don't think that's hard to recognize. We live in a world where rifles exist. We live in a world where guns exist. Maybe prior to that world, when you had to like use a sling or a bow and arrow for long distance shit, maybe. Of like, you know, the stature. It's such a, you know, like,
You know,
anyone is vulnerable to something like that.
You know what really fascinates me? The people who follow Candace are willing to believe that the French Foreign Legion and Israel are trying to kill her, but not that a crackpot leftist killed Charlie Kirk. Right?
So we had a crackpot rightoid try to kill Donald Trump. So I don't know. Like there were words from Charlie Kirk himself about potentially there being some plot from Israel to kill him because he had started criticizing them, or at least to silence him, or some other. So there's seeds that were sown for that kind of conspiracy-minded stuff. And I've seen like Kyle Kalinske talk about that too. I don't believe a damn thing about that. I believe we live in a world where simultaneously Israel could have wanted him silenced for one reason or another. Like Netanyahu just decided that was a prerogative of his, but also for them not to have done the deed, right? Evidenced by, I'm sure there are plenty of people right now that you can think of that you want dead, and if they tripped down the stairs right now and just ended up dead as a result, then yeah, that would happen. Like, you can think of leaders of a terrorist organization that you don't want to be alive, maybe Putin that you don't want to be alive. You can think of a child molester and you don't want them to be alive, and yet you don't get up and do something about that all the time. Not everybody who wants somebody dead, even a world leader, will actually get up and do the deed all of the time. So I think it's fair to say that there is some salience to the idea that Israel might not have wanted Kirk to be saying the things that he said, but not have actually done the deed at all. I think to argue that they ordered a hit or an assassination at some point is a little bit far-fetched. Maybe, kind of. It's one of those things to believe when you have evidence. And right now, we don't have evidence of that. And what's funny, though, is even if we did have evidence of that, I don't know if any of that would come to light because of how deep our ties are with that nation.
We literally watched video of Teslas burning, of people getting out of vehicles. Like, there's a video of a car on a highway speeding up in front of a woman, slamming his brakes on, getting out and screaming at her because she's in a Tesla. We've seen news reports of Teslas unloaded upon. There is video of a man walking up to a Trump supporter and yelling, what did he say, like, we got one here or something like that? And then he puts 2 bullets in the chest of Aaron Danielson.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when there's a shooting at a university and Charlie is speaking, and quick work, they find a suspect with leftist sympathies, a trans boyfriend, and these chats from leftists and trans people online saying...
Okay, so the point about Aaron Danielson, so that's from 2020. He was apparently an American supporter of the far-right group Patriot Prayer, was shot and killed, allegedly, by a far-left activist after participating in a caravan which drove through Portland, Oregon, displaying banners and signs supporting Donald Trump and clashing with participants of the local George Floyd protests. On September 3rd, Danielson's suspected killer, Michael Renault, an American anti-fascist activist, was shot and killed by a federally led fugitive task force near Lacey, Washington. Renault had admitted to killing Danielson in an interview shortly before his death, stating it was in self-defense and that he believed Danielson about to stab another protester. Interesting. Police say Renault had followed and targeted Danielson, who was armed with a pistol, baton, and bear spray, but no knife. Renault said the police were collaborating with far-right activists who were hurting him. Danielson's killing was the first time in over 26 years that a self-identified anti-fascist activist had been charged with a homicide. President Trump commended the U.S. Marshals for shooting Renault, describing it as retribution and claiming to have personally sent the U.S. Marshals to get Renault during the first presidential debate with Joe Biden. Okay, so it's looking like, at best, the evidence for all of that is a little bit skewed. Because we don't know if a person was, we don't know if Danielson was actually going to go attack somebody. We don't know if that was self-defense. We don't know if there was, some kind of mental issue going on with Michael Renault. We don't know any of that. And we're not going to know because they're both dead now. So Tim obviously has an idea of how he thinks that those events went. I'm not going to try to say that they did or did not go that way because I don't have enough evidence to do so. I don't. But I think it's interesting. I actually realized where the but was. I do think it's interesting that Tim Pool is using that to try to sell a narrative that there is this pandemic of far-left activists who are engaging in violence, when the numbers don't really support that. The numbers haven't supported that by the FBI in years, and even on the report I'm reading, it said that a far-left activist had not been caught doing anything like this, at least not stated, in the last 26 fucking years before that happened. I will not deny that it does happen from time to time, but the numbers don't seem to bear out that it's happening all that often, especially not all that often unprovoked. But Tim Pool does want to sell you an idea of the left going so crazy that he had to leave the left and become a disenfranchised liberal turned Republican.
Something is going to happen to Charlie. It's like, wow, there's a preponderance of evidence here. Let's see what else they present in trial. And there are people going, nah, I can't believe that at all. But the French Foreign Legion, Emmanuel Macron, and Israelis are currently out to get Candace.
Well, people were primed from COVID to not trust government narratives on just about every level. And it kind of ties in also with...
So that one's weird to me. I understand where it's coming from. I understand where the conspiracy-minded stuff comes from. I understand where it's coming from in relation to COVID. At the same time, that shouldn't have primed people in the first place because the government wasn't the ones primarily dropping the ball there. I mean, yeah, they did. But when it comes to information coming out, most of that was being skewed and fucked up by pundits and podcasters more than anything.
A lot of distrust with the FBI right now because people don't think Kash Patel is doing the job he's supposed to be doing.
I mean, he probably huffs a line of coke before every job, so that may be changing things a little bit for him.
So you can't have a movement that's been unbelievably critical of official narratives for such a long time and not expect something like this to eventually come to a head and go off the rails at a certain point. I think it was fodder. I think it was perfect timing.
When we had this incident Saturday morning, there were people tweeting that the shooting, before any information came out, they were saying that it was because Milo was speaking the truth and they were trying to stop us. Not a joke. They were tweeting that Milo came on the show and he was speaking the truth, and so someone was sent to stop them. It is actually really simple. Our security reported a gray sedan had been circling the building all day and they were keeping an eye out. And then a similar looking vehicle opened fire around midnight. It is scary to realize that one crazy person who has a legal weapon and knows where you are can end you, be you famous or otherwise. Why is it so hard to believe that Tyler Robinson is the person?
Okay, so what he's talking about is likely this scenario here, I believe.
Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and we are following a developing story that we have been tracking here for a little more than 24 hours after a shooting. Gunshots fired there at the home of Tim Pool, who, of course, is known as a big political commentator with millions upon millions of fans on different social media platforms. Now, I do want to start from the beginning here because we heard from Pool on social media Saturday as he gave the initial information saying A vehicle approached our property and opened fire. No one was hurt. Our security team is reviewing the incident and will be relaying the report to appropriate law enforcement. This is the price we pay for speaking out against evil. He went on to say, my immediate thought is someone was trying to scare us, but we have a security gate and armed guards, and it's possible this deterred something more serious. Now, earlier today, he posted this follow-up saying, security believes 3 shots were fired. We are in contact with police and FBI. Thank you for everyone who reached out. If anyone has archived Chicken City, the shots should be audible. Unfortunately, we do not archive the live stream. This would be Friday between midnight and 1 a.m. Important to note, he's asking folks to kind of listen in if they do have that podcast somewhere, because you should be able to hear those gunshots fired.
Just out of curiosity, Tim, I mean, I'm not... Okay, so let me first say, first and foremost, I do not think that it's okay for shots to be fired near Tim Pool's fucking house. I do not think that's okay. I don't. I think that he spreads misinformation. I think that his rhetoric harms people. I think that it causes problems. But I do not think that those disagreements should be enough for violence to be enacted on Tim. Period. Second part, Tim, you're a professional podcaster. Why the fuck don't you archive your stream? Holy shit. That feels like very, very basic ass shit that damn near anybody who has been doing streaming for long enough knows to do. Sometimes we don't. I've fucked up in that regard. I've made that mistake, but like that feels like a thing you should do, my guy. Jessa says, I come back to Pim Tool being the victim of gun violence. I wonder if the problem is that there are more guns than people in this country and it's harder to get a car than a gun. One thing or another, I'm not going to try to justify in any way, shape, or form gunshots happening because his ideology of the things he says. Now, I think it's crazy to have the righteous stance of, hey, they were trying to do it because we speak out against evil. Like, no, shut the fuck up. People disagreed with you, and there are people who are extremists who are dumb, and you don't know the motivations of the people who are doing it in the first place, not yet anyway. You are a large enough streamer with a large enough audience and a large enough array of potential enemies that it's hard to pin down. Like, if somebody did it to me, my audience is small enough that it's probably easy to tell that it's, somebody who may have tried to dox me. It may be, once upon a time, it could have been freaking call for an uprising because he was threatening to do that. Once upon a time, you might have been able to figure out who that was just by figuring out that somebody was trying to attack me. But we're past the drama with Call. That said, I do not think that bad shit happening to Tim is a good thing. That's not a thing we should be celebrating. The norm that we should be celebrating is not that political influencers have gunshots aimed at them. That's not a norm we should be celebrating.
It's actually not. That was kind of my point earlier. It's not hard to believe. You have to be motivated to not believe it. Or at least to be like, no, this is definitely not it. We need to find the real truth. You have to have a motivation. And to your point, Brett, the real damage from COVID is that people just don't believe anything. Mm-hmm. There were so many people that in the beginning of COVID, they got taken. They were like, everyone believed that COVID was going to be the end of the world, and it was going to be the new pandemic that really, killed billions and billions of people and all of this stuff. And so there's a lot of people that are just like, I'm not going to get taken again. So if the government says it, it definitely isn't true.
So COVID was a massive pandemic that had disproportionate amount of deaths attributed to it specifically. As of right now, since its inception into the populace of the world, it has claimed 7,103,462 people. It has killed millions. I know that there were people who hyperbolized it and said that COVID was gonna do way more, and then there were people who hyperbolized it being a plandemic on the other side. But we got the mRNA vaccines out very quickly. People isolated, which lowered the damage that COVID could do. Honestly, I think people tried to downplay now what COVID was or what it was like to live under COVID and try to think that it's like, oh, this is just how the government got you. Like, no. As evidence to how COVID operates now versus how it operated when it happened in the last 28 days. I actually have all this information for you. In the last 28 days, COVID's killed 257 people. It still claims lives across the world, but it claimed many more lives in the first year than it did afterwards. A few hundred deaths a month? There's plenty of sicknesses that do that. There's plenty of sicknesses that manage that just fine. Now that COVID is endemic to the human species, we have adjusted to it. We have developed vaccines that lessen the power that virus is going to have. And like with all viruses that start out hyperlethal, the variants of the virus that survive later on into their lives are the ones that kill fewer people. Because a virus that cannot keep a vector, a host alive to spread it, does not propagate. The version of the virus that is hyperlethal, and it killed people in my family, the version of the virus that is hyperlethal does not exist today with the same potency that it once did. Because viruses on average do not survive when they do that. That said, people are still suffering from long COVID right now. There are people who have mental issues because of long COVID. There are people who have lung issues because of long COVID. My girlfriend's one of them. She has lung issues. She can't breathe very well, and it's because of COVID. That is something her doctors confirmed to her. And her mental issues, I hate to say, they're still getting really bad, and they aren't really improving, as evidenced by the fact that she's still dating me, which, you know, I feel like the only reason somebody does that long term? Well, I don't want to speak for her. I'm kidding on that last one. Anyway, back to the video. Let's let it conclude.
And again, it doesn't matter that it's not actually the FBI doing the investigation, that it's the state of Utah. It doesn't matter. It's the authority and the people that are motivated to say, I don't believe the authority. No matter what they tell me, they're definitely lying. And part of this, to your point.
So he actually is speaking about a kind of person that I understand fairly well. There is a conspiracy-minded individual as an archetype of people that just will not believe anything if any person in authority says it. This is the kind of person who doesn't listen to studies, doesn't listen to experts, doesn't listen to anything. This kind of person does exist. They're a problem.
Again, like you said, the problem it rests with the government. It's because they were actually deceptive to the American people about COVID. When people were like, "Oh, you can't go to you have to stand 6 feet away from people, but it's perfectly fine if you're out protesting for George Floyd." People were just like, "Man, this is all BS," and rightly so.
So the reason that was happening, and I explained this when it happened, it's that people tend to think in binaries. People are accustomed to thinking in binaries. It's how we learn how to operate when we're kids. Things are either good or things are bad. Things are right or things are wrong. People don't tend to think with nuance. So what happened with the George Floyd protests, and I explained this in videos when it was going on. With the George Floyd protests, there was a weighing of options given. Do you suppress people who are trying to fight against an injustice, who have media attention, positive media attention? Do you fight against that as an administration that went on record to fucking smoke bomb American citizens for fucking photo shoots? Do you do that? Or do you accept that the cause that they are fighting for outweighs the damage they are causing largely to themselves by organizing in the way that they are? You can live in the world where simultaneously the average Joe should socially distance, should take precautions to protect themselves and their family, and also there are protesters that believe that their cause is worth the risk, and so they are going to go do that. Both of those things can exist as true simultaneously. And to try to argue that I understand that there are people that believe for some reason that these two things cannot exist simultaneously. And as a result, those people tend to have the opinions that he's pointing out here. I understand those people exist. I just think they're rather silly, personally.
I think the bigger problem is people can't critical think. And so I wonder what this age range is of people, A, that were taken during COVID tricked during COVID and now woke up and are angry. And then I wonder of the people now that are online that are so gullible in believing everything and anything and following it. Is that the younger generation? It's because of the lack of education and the ability to critical think. We've seen that happen over the last 5 years.
I don't think you're wrong, but I do honestly, I think you're right. It is the gullible people, and there's a certain amount of ego that goes along with it. If you're a little below average of intelligence, you definitely don't want to think that people are smarter than you.
Yeah, it's very Dunning-Kruger. Also, there's a quote from Death of Expertise that talks about that generally American people will do everything in their power to preserve their ego, even if it means never broadening their intellect. Like, I understand that. I can get that.
And you want to sit and you want to be able to say, look, I'm actually smart. I know the real stuff. And you see it all over the internet. People that are just like, you're dumb because you believe this. I'm the smart one. And you can, I mean, I see it in my mentions all the time. People, they don't just say, nah, man, that's wrong. It's, you're an idiot. I'm so much smarter than you.
Yeah, people, that's a frustrating one. At this point, I'm just going to say when somebody obviously lacks reading comprehension, I'm just going to say that they look like they play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Players can't read fucking cards. Cyberchill says, is she trying to say that Gen Z, one of the most critical and nihilistic, are the whole non-critical thinkers? I think what she's trying to do is subtly suggest the kind of person that might do that without actually saying it, without actually like being married to the idea of the person who does that, of the person who is non-critical.
I'm better than you. And it's a ton of ego. It's an ego boost. It makes people feel good about themselves to say, you're dumb and I'm the one with the special knowledge, the insider knowledge, because I watch Candace Owens.
Yeah, you're describing basic conspiracy theory thinking. This is how I thought when I watched Alex Jones. That actually is exactly how I thought when I watched Alex Jones. At this point, I think we've gotten everything we're going to get from the Tyler Robinson part. I thought we were going to talk more about Tim saying that the smile was evil or some shit, because that's literally what the title of the video is, but I got by the title of the video. I got trolled by the title of the video. But I do agree that is a very, very common method of operating when you are very conspiracy minded. You believe that you have access to the special knowledge, you want to inform people of the special knowledge, and you view people who are not awake like you with your special knowledge as being beneath you. It is an ego-driven thing. It's a problematic set of behaviors. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I want to go ahead and throw a pitch to y'all at the end of the video. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. If you like watching politics, but you want to see somebody who tries to cover things in a very fair, very even way, despite my political leanings, who also tries to make politics a little less miserable for you, then consider subscribing to me and maybe even telling a couple friends what I'm doing over here. Thank you very, very much for that. That said, insert a video tagline here. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagittarius, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Sereth, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.